In the next few minutes we have together, I'd like to share with you a small sampling of what God's been doing through Orphans Promise. With work in over 60 countries, I'd like to show you 4 different projects where your generosity and compassion are making a difference. My heart always breaks when I hear the story of a child whose mother or father has abandoned them. Can't imagine having to deal with that kind of rejection. And yet it happens to children around the world every day. The little boy you're about to meet was left alone in the street as an infant by his mom. Thankfully, he was found and rescued by his elderly grandmother. The problem was, now, how could they afford to raise him? That's where you came in.
Grandma Uri came running after a neighbor told her about a crying baby in the street.
She said, "Come, hurry. He looks like your grandson."
It was her grandson, Cobb, sitting in the dirt, his legs covered with ant bites. His mother had abandoned him.
He was crying and trying to get away from the ants. I picked him up and comforted him. It broke my heart to see him that way.
Cobb's mother never returned, so Grandma Uri and her husband, Keo, raised Cobb as best they could until Grandpa suffered a stroke.
My husband used to drive a motorcycle taxi, but after the stroke, he couldn't walk or talk.
So Grandma Uri had to start supporting the family. She had a small market stall with a leaky roof.
I felt so tired and alone. I didn't have the money to fix the stall. I had to borrow money from our relatives just to buy food.
One relative suggested they send Cobb to an orphanage.
The thought of giving up Cobb never crossed my mind. I told myself that I would take care of him until he grows up.
I love my grandma very much. She takes good care of me. Without her, I would probably be dead.
But things got worse when the government shut down Uri's stall because it was too close to a canal.
The authorities told me to leave because the canal flooded. I tried to find work at the market, but people said, "No, you are too old."
So CBN's Orphans Promise helped Grandma keep her family together. First, we built her a new stand in a safe location. Then we set it up with lots of groceries, along with the stove, kitchen utensils, and a cooler, so Grandma can prepare meals to sell. Grandpa's condition has improved so much that he's now helping at the store too.
Since Orphans Promise helped us, we have been earning 6 times more than I used to make. Business is so good that sometimes we ran out of things to sell.
I love our new shop. It helps our family a lot. Thank you, Orphans Promise.
Orphanages are sometimes the only solution available when a child is orphaned, abandoned, or abused. But we know that what every child needs is a safe, loving family and home. And that's why Orphans Promise created our Keeping Families Together program. Often, as in Grandma Uri's case, a small investment in a helping hand made all the difference in the world for the entire family. Now Cobb is not an orphan. Preventive measures like this take children like Cobb from at-risk to thriving. Well, there is another tragedy that often separates and devastates families, and that is war. As most of you know, OP's work began in Ukraine. In fact, some of our first projects were in the now war-torn region of southeastern Ukraine. The dire circumstances resulting from the conflict have presented children and families with desperate needs and losses that we could not have imagined. Let me show you.
Last year, the city of Slavansk became one of the first rebel strongholds in the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Unfortunately, I know what war is. It's when people kill other people.
3 months later, the rebels were routed, but the scorched earth they left behind was a chilling reminder of their fierce determination to conquer Ukraine. The residents of Slavansk are fiercely determined too, to rebuild their shattered city and their lives.
It is still damp and wet in the house, in spite of all my efforts.
Ira, a single mother of 2 children, escaped the siege, but returned to find her home uninhabitable. She sought help to rebuild, but no one responded. So Ira tried to make the repairs herself.
When it rains, water comes in to the ceiling and lands on our heads. This is why I cover myself and the children with the oilcloth so we can sleep.
We don't like to stay under the oilcloth. It is difficult to breathe and not pleasant.
Ukrainian winters are severe, and Ira's one small heater was broken. She knew the moldy, damp house and the bitter cold could sicken her children.
I just hope that somebody will help us, but it is more and more difficult to believe this with each passing day.
When a team from CBN's Orphans Promise surveyed the damage in Slavansk and saw the condition of Ira's home, we immediately agreed to help. Volunteers from a local church joined the effort, and just 2 weeks later, this brave single mother and her children returned to a warm, cozy home.
It is not cold because we have windows and a new roof.
We feel warm now and won't get sick. And our mother won't have to cover us with the oilcloth anymore.
To keep the children entertained during the long winter, we gave them the new Superbook program.
It is good, and I rejoice after watching it.
Thank you for fixing our house and giving us a new heater. I could never have done this alone. It is cold outside, but it is warm in our house. Thank you very much.
This is just one single mom and her daughters. We've had to relocate many children from another area because their orphanage was severely damaged by Russian shells. We don't know how long the situation will continue, but we plan to be there to help. Every week we deliver bread, water, formula, diapers, and blankets to children and families in need. It may surprise you to learn that not all children in orphanages are truly orphaned, nor are all of them abandoned. In many instances, the culprit is poverty. On a recent trip to Kyrgyzstan, our regional manager, Karen Springs, happened to meet a little boy who stole her heart. She had no idea that encounter would change his life.
I was able to travel to Kyrgyzstan last year to see the projects that Orphans Promise is supporting there and visit a children's home that we had been supporting. We had helped them do a micro enterprise. We'd helped them start a chicken farm. So it was a chance for me just to come to the orphanage, meet the director, spend some time with the kids and see the facility. There was this little boy that was, I don't know, just kind of a sadness in his eyes. So I just naturally said, what's his name and what's his story? And so they said his name was Edemir and he was 5 and that he'd only been there a couple months. He was taken away from his mother and him and his sisters are here. So I said, well, you know, was mom an alcoholic? And they said, no, his mom's a good mom. He misses his mom. The family couldn't feed their children. They were going hungry and they didn't have enough money. Immediately, I just had this compassion for this mother. I was imagining, you know, what if I couldn't feed my children and they were taken to an orphanage, you know, not because I had done something, not because I drank, but because I couldn't provide. And in my head, I'm thinking, how much does it cost for them to be here at the orphanage? How much would it cost for us to help this family? And, you know, so much over the last year at Orphans Promise, we've really focused on our Keeping Families Together program and what it means to come alongside a family in a crisis or poverty situation. So I couldn't get him out of my mind, and the rest of the day, we were outside with the kids. I was taking pictures and I met his sisters. You know, they were all about posing for the camera and he just started to warm up. You know, his little sad eyes, he started to kind of joke around and wink and laugh. And so I went back to my hotel room that night and I really had a hard time falling asleep. And I just felt like if I was gonna have peace, if I was gonna leave this country with answers to this story, like I needed to see for myself what the situation was. So we drove the hour or so out of town to the village, and the grandmother starts telling us her story and how she recently has given her life to Christ through a local church, that she had rejected Islam and that she had turned to Jesus. And so she kind of just started explaining the reasons why they were out of work. They were in a hard situation with their house, this very small 2-room home that they had. They were about to lose it. Okay, well, my children need to be fed. They need an education. I'll put them in the children's home and that'll be that. But in order for the orphanage to get funding for the kids, they were gonna have to remove the parental rights. So the mother and the grandmother were in the process of having their rights taken away, and they were literally days away. They had the paperwork and they were ready to sign it. And when we heard this, we just said, no, 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 stop. Don't you see what you're doing? Yes, you're going through a hard time, and maybe the orphanage was a solution for a short time, but we want to find a way to help you get your life back together. And I pulled out my camera and I said, look, like, this is them yesterday. They talked about you and they miss you. And I could just see, you know, that register with her. The whole time we were there, it was just this feeling of like, wow, God, like, you're giving us the privilege to be here and to understand how kids end up in institutions. And I just felt like for every Ademir, for every one, a kid like him, there's 100 more kids. While I was there, we had connected with a pastor of a local church. We were able to set up a plan and how we as Orphans Promise and we as the local church could stand behind them that first year so that they could grow as a family and then slowly, you know, diminish that support as they didn't need it anymore. So the grandmother's now employed, the mother's making steps towards employment. And I think it was within a month of me having visited, the kids were back with mom and with grandma. And so we've been renting them an apartment. We've been helping them with some basic needs with food and clothing. We've helped get Ademir in a really good preschool. And this church came around them. The grandma started going to Bible studies. The family was attending church. And, you know, in the pastor's weekly reports, he'd say, you know, Ademir's family is in church this Sunday and they're doing really well. When I saw those first pictures that were sent of the family together, my heart just leapt with joy because I thought, wow, God, like, you are so good. You allowed us to play a part in that. And just to know, like, that was results. That we went on a trip, we saw a need, we were able to do something and make a difference. And I'm still in awe of how God did that.
I think of how differently this story could have ended. You allowed us to step in and change lives for generations. When you support CBN, you help to create a large and comprehensive safety net for children, for families and communities that are in desperate need. This next story is a clear-cut picture of how that works. You'll see how the many facets of CBN all join together to bring about change, restoration, health, and hope. And as you watch, I think you'll fall in love with Teddy, just like I have. Let's go to Kenya.
This is the farm in Kenya. This is the water well that waters the farm in Kenya. This is the school that uses the water and the food that grows on the farm in Kenya. And this is Teddy. He and his family have been transformed by the water well and the school, a joint venture by CBN International and Orphans Promise. A line of irrigation pipes run from the well to Teddy's nearby house and garden, where his family is able to grow nutritious food year-round. That's especially important because Teddy has AIDS. He receives free medicine from the government, and when they're combined with good nutrition, it's a 1-2 punch that keeps the disease at bay. In Teddy's family, 3 of 6 children and both parents have the disease. So this water has been a true blessing to enable them to grow food, feed their few animals, and stay healthy. Water is an ongoing challenge in much of Africa, so a properly managed water well can have a big impact. This CBN International water project is run on solar power and features drip irrigation, an efficient way to get the proper amount of water to the crops. And the plantings are staggered so that food is harvested every month, year-round. The food feeds the girls at the Orphans Promise Darko Secondary School and also provides income for the running of the school. The school is part of our Darko Orphan project in Kenya for orphans and vulnerable children. The Hebrew word Darko comes from the familiar scripture, "Train up a child in the way he should go." Darko means the way. These girls are receiving a high-quality education with the goal of directing them in the way or individualized path that God has for each of them.
Divided by -3 multiplied by 7.
We received an encouraging update since we visited Teddy and his family. The oldest daughter, Kalundi, is now studying at our school. She had been in and out of her former school because of a lack of money for fees. She is 16, had almost given up on education, and was running around with men, which really alarmed her parents. When we learned of this, we offered to sponsor her at Darko Secondary School, providing a much better education. Kalundi is now making great strides to catch up academically. Plus, she has the spiritual and moral support to get her life back on track. Teddy is now school-aged, and we're paying his fees so that he can attend a better quality school. We look forward to great things from this bright and cheerful boy. This is the water provided by CBN International. This is the school provided by Orphans Promise. And this is Teddy and his family, whose lives have been greatly impacted by this project.
You fall in love with that family, don't you? Well, this is just a small peek at a few of the projects Orphans Promise is involved in, touching lives, changing circumstances, and bringing hope. We're making an impact on the children of the world, one family, one community, one nation at a time. We couldn't do it without you. You really are making a difference, and we simply cannot thank you enough. God bless you.